Okay.
So I would like to welcome everybody to the latest Thursday evening RDA webinar. My name's Peter Dean and I am the Director of Finance for RDA UK, based at the National Training Centre at Lowlands Equestrian Centre in Warwickshire. I'm joined, hopefully you can see on your screens, I'm joined by Catherine Morgan and Richard Doubleday, both of whom work for Howden Insurance Brokers. According to my notes, Catherine is the Associate Director of the Sport and Recreation Division, and Richard is the Executive Chairman of the Sport and Entertainment Division. I don't know whether division is the right word, sorry.
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
First of all, I'm going to ask just Catherine, you are, or I see you as our equine specialist within the insurance broker team. Is that right? Are you a rider?
Yes. So I head up the equine team. We have a specific equine team within Howden. So we deal with all sorts of equine associations and equine businesses. And as you might expect, being in the equine division, that came from a love of horses going way back. Member of the pony club, and had horses since I was very young. And sadly, I don't get to ride so much these days. But it's certainly still a love of mine. So it's great to do a job that I'm interested in.
Yeah, and I know both you and Richard, we've obviously seen you at the National Training Centre and also at the National Championships at Hartbury. Richard, you have been involved with RDA for a number of years, I believe.
At least 10. I was trying to work out earlier today, but it's at least 10, yes. And I'm very upset, Peter, you didn't ask me if I ride. I used to ride. I used to be a modern pentathlete many years ago, thousands of years ago. So I've fallen off horses all over Europe. So, yes.
Well, there we go. I've learned something already. There we go.
Yeah.
I'm going to hand over to Richard in just one moment, just to say that there is the Q&A, question and answer function. So if, as we're going along, there are specific questions that, if we've got time, we put to Richard and Catherine, do use that, and I will be trying to keep an eye on that box and picking out kind of some themes of any questions that are arising. So I'm going to hand over to you, Richard, now. I'll put myself on mute to talk about RDA insurance package, please. Thank you.
Okie dokie. All right. Well, first of all, thanks everybody for joining the webinar, and thanks to RDA for inviting myself and Catherine to join in. I can't believe there's 39 people who are interested in insurance, so that's nice. It's a pretty turgid subject at the best of times. We've been the RDA's broker for about 10 years, and we specialize in sport and recreation. So anything that is sport and recreation related is a client of ours. So we insure a lot of equine organisations, which falls into Catherine's division. But in my bit, we insure the likes of the Rugby Football Union, the Lawn Tennis Association, the England and Wales Cricket Board, and so on. So we've got a massive involvement in sport and recreation. That's all we do. So we were appointed by RDA about 10 years ago, and our role is to design a package of insurance that is appropriate for the needs of the association. Now that is put together based on client needs. So in putting together the package, we would talk to the likes of the chief executive, the finance director, etc. And we'd also draw on the experience we have working with other similar national governing bodies. The program that we have subsequently devised for groups comprises of 3 different types of cover. First one is called public liability, and I'm sure everybody knows what public liability is. But we use a an insurer called Hiscox, and in conjunction with Hiscox, we've developed a very wide policy wording that covers more than just public liability. So it covers what's called directors and officers indemnity, professional indemnity, employers liability, and so on. So effectively, the public liability policy is designed to cover all non-criminal legal liability. So effectively, what we're covering is all of the groups through one centrally negotiated policy, and that covers any activity that is recognised or approved by the RDA. So if the RDA says it's permissible, we insure it. The other covers we do are a personal accident policy for staff and volunteers. So if someone is hurt and suffers life-changing injuries as a consequence of their voluntary work or their paid work with a group or centre, they receive some no-fault compensation. Excuse me. And the third area, again for groups, is a legal expenses policy, which falls into two parts. First of all, it provides 24/7 legal advice line. So if you need advice in relation to the running of your centre or your group, whatever it's in relation to, but if you need legal advice, we provide a 24-hour a day, 7-day-a-week call centre. And if a particular issue needs to be pursued, or if someone is pursuing you and you need to defend your actions, then we provide up to £100,000 in legal expenses protection. So it's 3 policies specifically covering groups, staff, volunteers, and of course the RDA itself. Have I missed anything, Catherine?
No, I don't think so. But from my side, on the equine team, we can also cover any additional bits that your groups need that aren't automatically covered under the group schemes. Excuse me. So things like if you have property that you own, so a lot of groups will own TAC. You may even own ponies, so we can cover vets bills, mortality cover for any horses owned by groups. Property cover. We can also cover any additional liability that isn't covered within the RDA policy. So whilst it's an all-encompassing policy for RDA activities, there are some activities that you may want to do but that aren't necessarily sanctioned by the RDA. So able-bodied riding, any kind of commercial riding in addition to RDA activities, we can put in place liability policies to cover those additional bits. So, it really is something that, that there's pretty much a solution for anything separate to that. But obviously the vast majority of the liability is covered under the main group policy.
Good. Peter, do you want to dive in, or do you want me just to carry your prattling on?
By all means, carry on. A couple of areas or a couple of questions that I've got. Is it good value for money?
Yeah,
that's a leading question, and also obviously on the financial side again, I know that you were able to negotiate a good hibernation rebate for us from the insurers because of the lack of the low level of activity last year. Yeah. So, but by all means, carry on. But those are a couple of areas. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I'd much rather answer questions than prattle on. So the good value for money, I'm glad we've been asked that question, and I think the participants will be reassured to know is that is a question that we are constantly asked by Peter and by Ed Bracher, who's the Chief Executive of the Riding for the Disabled Association. I'm sure you all know that. It's essential to us. I suppose the first priority is that we want to provide you with really good quality insurance protection, but we know that it has to be as competitively priced as possible. So Peter and Ed make us do regular checks to make sure that the cover that the RDA groups are getting is good value for money in relation to them having to get it on the open market on their own. And it would afford, insurance would be much more expensive to get if you did it on your own. And also, I do not believe that you would be able to get the same level of cover or the same quality of protection if you did it on your own. For example, we provide a £20 million limit of indemnity on the public liability side of the insurance. Catherine hopefully will wade in at some point if I stop talking, but we've done some market testing. We do not believe it would be possible for an individual centre to get anything more than a £5 or a £10 million limit of indemnity. That's the beauty of the RDA being able to negotiate cover and a premium on behalf of every one of its constituents. The other question was the hibernation rebate. We were obviously all devastated by the COVID pandemic last year, and the timing was, well, couldn't really have been any worse. The RDA renews its insurance policy on the 1st of April, and we negotiated the premium and the cover. We usually do that about 2 weeks before, so the middle of March. So we'd arranged the premium and it was all agreed. But then, of course, all of the centres had to shut down, some of them for a very long time. So what we did with Hiscox was negotiate what's called a hibernation rebate. Now, I won't go into the specific financial details because that's Peter's job to do that. But we were able to negotiate over a 6-month period, a very significant rebate that was paid back to the RDA after 6 months. We then, as we approached this year's renewal, we then had to make a tactical decision how we could achieve the best value for money. Now, there was so little activity in the second 6 months of the 2021 financial period that we decided to negotiate another 6-month hibernation rebate, which we've got. So we've been given, or the RDA have been given a significant, a huge rebate, a hibernation rebate covering 12 months. Now that was deliberate, and what we've been doing both last year and this year is monitoring the full extent of the activity. Ed Brasher and Peter, but specifically Ed Brasher, sends me regular updates. How many centres are conducting what level of activity? And Ed has also sent me a copy of the Road to Restart document that's been circulated. So we have a pretty good idea currently how many centres are operating and the level of activity. We also know that some centres won't be able to open until September because of the school holidays, because of all of other restrictions. So we know exactly what's going on. And what we hope to be able to do is to negotiate a further rebate with Hiscox for this current financial year. Now, Hiscox haven't definitely said that they will give us a rebate, but they certainly haven't ruled it out. But strategically, we felt that was the best possible course of action. And that's an action that we've taken, as I said, in consultation with Ed and with Peter, and we continue to do that on a regular basis. I guess I speak to Peter at least once a fortnight and probably Ed once a month. It's been a very challenging period, but we have done everything we can to save our RDA groups as much money as we possibly can. And to be fair to Hiscox, I think they've been very fair as well. They love the RDA. They love the work you do. They think it's incredibly well regulated and controlled. The training of your volunteers and staff, for example, is fantastic. And they've treated RDA centres, dare I say it, much better than lots of our other clients. So it has been very well managed, I think, over the last 15 months or so. So I hope that's answered the question. So yes, I think it's good value for money. And yes, I think we're trying to save as much money as we can during what's been a very challenging period.
Absolutely. And can I just chip in going back to the 20 million limit in terms of good value for money. So our division and all of our competitors, you know, the maximum really that you would be able to offer on one policy would be a 10 million limit. To get up to 20 million, you'd have to buy an additional policy, which, you know, would easily cost 3,000 in the first place, you know, if not more. So it really is good value for money, and it's the policy that is placed. It's a group policy, so it's covering more than one entity. So it's covering RDA UK and it's covering all of the groups. So whilst you know, we appreciate that all of the groups, you know, some groups are going to have been affected more than other groups, but we wouldn't be able to sort of negotiate a rebate on an individual basis for each group. So like Richard said, we've negotiated an overall hibernation rebate, and then obviously that will cascade down, you know, and it's not really possible to do sort of individual sort of rebates. So you know, because of the nature of the policy.
Thanks both. I'm just going to clarify if I can. So you're saying, Richard, that there may be a future additional hibernation rebate, possibly in the autumn or September, October time. This year.
Yeah. So we only accepted the second rebate for last year on the basis that it didn't prejudice our ability to negotiate another one for this financial year. Well, like I say, Hiscox would not promise, but by the same token, they've also agreed that they're not going to rule it out. So it really depends on the level of activity, and I know that you're monitoring that very, very carefully. One of the other things, of course, is the claims, and I suspect a lot of people may think that in most of 2020 nothing was happening, and therefore there weren't any claims, and therefore the underwriters were making a huge profit. It doesn't work like that, unfortunately. And I just want to give 3 examples of what's been happening during the course of the year. There's 3 claims in particular. I can't go into too much detail, but what I can say is that we've had one claim that was originally reserved by insurers at £25,000. That's how much the insurers felt they were going to have to pay in damages. That claim during the course of last year went up from an estimated £25,000 to £125,000. So that means that £100,000 extra had to be found from somewhere. There was another claim that came in that's been reserved at between £20,000 and £25,000, and there's another claim where negligence was found, and NHS costs of £20,000 have had to be paid in addition to the original amount. So during the course of last year, Hiscox had to pay something, or believe they've had to pay something in the region of £125,000 in claims. Now, that's been balanced by 1 or 2 reserves that have gone away, but it serves to illustrate just because there's no activity, it doesn't mean to say that there aren't claims against RDA members.
Thank you for clarifying that. We've had a few questions in. Interestingly, Catherine's, quite a few of them are to do with the potential to purchase additional insurance. How do we go about doing that? And I think
Catherine's mobile phone number is
yeah, and I think I know the answer to one of the questions, and that's if there is a if a group's tack and equipment, etc., is stored somewhere, can that be included within the RDA insurance? I'm pretty sure the answer is the RDA insurance doesn't cover what I would call contents insurance.
No, you're exactly right, Peter. It doesn't. So the groups are responsible for insuring their own property. But they are policies that we can place for you. And I'm actually in the process of getting a specific wording for RDA and Pony Club, because Pony Club is one of our clients, so that centres will be able to insure through Hiscox. You know, and obviously because the group policy is already through Hiscox, we're hoping that they will agree preferential rates. So, you know, shortly that should be coming within the next few months. But in terms of how you go about getting that, if you would like a quote for us, we will be very happy to speak to any RDA groups. And I think it's probably best, Peter, if you send out our details after this to the participants. You know, and we will be very, very happy to speak to anybody.
Yeah. Just on that point as well, if you want to get in contact with us, one of the things that's very important to us, as it is to the RDA, is communications, and that's obviously one of the reasons why we're doing the webinar tonight. Excuse me, but if you Google RDA Insurance Centre, there is a dedicated insurance centre that just gives you information about the policies that are available to groups, staff, volunteers and so on. And that also gives you contact details for the Howden office. So if you want any further information, if you want to get in contact with us, the RDA Insurance Centre is a good route. Having said that, if you want to get in touch with Peter or find us, then we're very happy to speak to anybody at any time. And we're not just about selling insurance products and services, although we like doing that, but if anyone needs any specific questions answering, don't be afraid to call us or email us, and we'll help as best we possibly can.
Yes, I think my email address is fairly widely known, pdean@rda.org.uk. If you can't remember my name, no problem. If you do info@rda.org.uk, then and any mention of insurance in an email comes into that inbox is very quickly forwarded on to me, and I in turn often will forward it on to a member of the Howden team if I don't know the answer. We have had one specific question, just going back to the legal expenses cover.
Yeah.
Does it cover civil litigation only, or can it cover, for example, legal work around a lease renewal, etc.?
Yes, that's what it's designed for. So it's effectively, you might have an employment dispute, a contract dispute. I can't think of anything else off the top of my head, but it is there is a phone number. In fact, if anyone's got a pen and paper, I'll give it to them. The number is 0344 571 7978. The company is called ARAG, and if you ring them up and say you're an RDA Central group, they will give you advice on the issue that you are have concerns about. And if it's necessary, if the problem needs to be escalated and legal costs are incurred, then, as I said, they will pay up to £100,000 per claim. It's a brilliant service. In fact, funnily enough, we did a little circular, didn't we, Peter, with the renewal notice for this year. So RDA have been very anxious to make members aware that this service exists. So please do investigate that if you've got a matter that's of concern to you.
Yeah, and if you're thinking, well, I didn't see that that circular, I have got lots of copies of the little leaflet still in the office, so I'm again, contact me and I'm happy to send one or more copies out to the group. That's no problem, which is specifically about the legal expenses cover. I'm going to throw another question at you, which I'm actually going to read. In addition to RDA, we are also a small riding school. Up to now, we have 2 separate covers with 2 different insurance companies. The non-RDA insurance does cover all riders, including disabled riders. Would you recommend we come under one umbrella, and could it possibly save money? What's the if it's a little bit complicated, then we can take it outside of this.
Right. The query is that there is RDA insurance that you have to have as an RDA group, and there is also a separate insurance for the riding school. Yeah, I think you would have to have the separate insurance for the riding school, because that is a commercial activity that isn't coming under RDA. So in terms of bringing it under one umbrella, we wouldn't be able to do that, because the RDA is a group policy for RDA activities. But obviously, you're not just getting your liability insurance through the RDA. As Richard said, there's also the personal accident benefits for all of your volunteers and any staff that are working on RDA activities. There's also the legal expenses, and also in the event of a claim, your insurer, whilst it's covering disabled activities as well, your insurer could say, well, actually, there's other cover in place, and they may, sort of do a joint claim payment. So it's not that in any way, that the RDA insurance isn't still covering you for other things. It is, and it's really quite comprehensive. And also, as Richard said, the limit of indemnity on RDA is 20 million. I very, very much doubt whether your riding school policy would be at 20 million. So unfortunately, yes, you would have to have the two separate policies. That is something that we could look at for you if you would like us to. We'd be very happy to, and we do give discounts to RDA groups, RDA centres. So you can contact us about that.
Thanks, Catherine. That makes sense. There's one final question, which is just referring to employers' liability. If a group doesn't have any employees as such, is the employer's liability section not applicable to them? And exactly what is employer's liability cover?
Yeah, okay.
Thanks.
Right, I'll start to answer that, but Catherine might want to dive in. Employer's liability protects the employers of people, and if somebody who is working at an RDA centre gets hurt, then they could sue their employer for damages. Now, there's a lot of centres who don't have any employees, but there are people who are volunteers who could, under certain circumstances, claim employees' rights. In other words, they could say, actually, I am employed by that group, and therefore I'm going to take an action against them as an employee rather than a volunteer. Now, there are certain legal advantages to suing someone as an employee as opposed to a volunteer, and I won't bore you with the details, but that does happen from time to time. Now, you might think, how could a volunteer claim employees' rights? Well, they might be given a uniform or an outfit that they have to wear. They might have to turn up to the centre at a particular time at a particular place. They might have to do specific jobs. And it's those sorts of things that can, under certain circumstances, turn somebody from a volunteer into an employee. It is essential that groups have this cover. Even if they think they don't need it, I can promise you they do. And it's not just in the RDA that this happens. This happens across all forms of sport and recreation. Sport and recreation in this country is run by volunteers, period. RDA is run by volunteers. Occasionally they get hurt, occasionally they could claim employees' rights. That's why the employer's liability policy is so critically important to the program of insurance that we're providing.
I think on the equine side, it is something that we hear quite commonly. The amount of times that we'll have a riding school on the phone, and they'll say we don't have any employees, our instructors are all freelance. And in reality they're not, because the riding school will be the ones booking the lessons. So a freelance instructor will turn up, and they will be told who they're teaching today at what time. And in those sorts of circumstances, they are absolutely an employee. And I think because the businesses aren't necessarily huge commercial organisations, that they sort of think that they can save a bit on insurance. And our advice is always, if there is any doubt at all, you need employer's liability. It is much better to be safe than sorry.
Thank you both. There's one final question. I'm going to finish with this one. If a volunteer, I'm just going to read it, sorry. If a volunteer is on private land, does that make any difference? Does it mean that employer's liability is excluded because they're on private land? If an employee or a volunteer is involved in RDA activity?
No, unless Catherine is going to correct me, it makes no difference whatsoever.
Great. I was hoping you'd say that.
Yeah.
Well, I feel that unfortunately we've come to the end of our time. I've been told that these Thursday webinars are pretty strict at trying to finish at 7:30. I think I've just about covered all of the questions that have come in, but do by all means contact me directly. Probably email is best, if that's possible, thank you, because I'm working from home just as much as I'm in the office, so phone messages I don't get very quickly. But I would like to thank everybody for attending, and thank you very much to Richard and Catherine for providing your expertise, your time, and for continuing to support RDA on behalf of Howden. So
yeah, well, if I could just have the last word, Peter. Thank you again for inviting us tonight. It really is a pleasure working with you guys at the RDA. We absolutely love it. You're a lovely client. We enjoy working with you enormously, and we have the highest possible regard for the groups, the centres, and all of the staff and the volunteers. So we would say we sincerely hope that you get back to normal activity as soon as you possibly can, and that you have a great summer, all being well. And that you get those kids and various people back on those horses and ponies and on the carriages as well. So thank you ever so much, Peter. And we're down to 45. We've driven a few away, Catherine, but we haven't done badly. So thanks ever so much. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody, for your time.